Hi guys, I have chatted with DeepSeek a bit, and as a result, it generated this article, which I mostly agree with. Here it goes. It's called the SMO and the Leftist Schism, a dialectical materialist analysis. The Special Military Operation, SMO, in Ukraine has acted not merely as a geopolitical earthquake, but as an ideological fault line, fracturing the already fragmented modern leftist movement. This isn't a simple disagreement over tactics. It represents a fundamental clash between two methodological approaches to understanding the world, a clash between dogmatic application and dialectical analysis. From the outside, the schism seems straightforward. One camp, often labeled as left pacifists or anti-imperialists of a single pole, declares Russia a classic imperialist aggressor. The other, sometimes controversially called patriotic leftists, argues that while Russia is a capitalist state, it is engaged in a defensive struggle against the primary force of modern imperialism, the US-led NATO bloc. But to stop at this surface-level description is to miss the profound theoretical struggle beneath. This is a battle between a static, formalistic worldview and a dynamic, dialectical materialist one. The dogmatic position, formal subsumption under Lenin. The first position draws a direct line from Lenin's seminal work, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, and applies its criteria as a rigid checklist. Since modern Russia exhibits certain features, large-scale capital export, a monopolized economy, a fusion of bank and industrial capital, it is formally declared imperialist, quote unquote. Its actions are therefore deemed inherently aggressive and reactionary. Strengths of this view: moral clarity. It offers an unambiguous, ethically clean stance against war and violence. Simplicity. It provides a clear and easily communicable enemy image. Weaknesses of this view: ahistorical analysis. It often ignores the radical transformation of the global capitalist system since Lenin's time. It fails to account for the concrete hierarchical structure of modern imperialism, where a core, the US and its satellites, exploits a periphery and semi-periphery. Abstract pacifism. The principle of no war but class war, while ultimately true, becomes an abstract slogan that in practice can objectively aid the dominant imperialist power by paralyzing resistance against its expansion. And besides, I would add to what's generated by DeepSeek that, no war but class war is more of a Trotskyite slogan. Because Lenin spoke and logically proved the need for constant struggle and for the dictatorship of the proletariat after the socialist revolution, a revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat at first, and then just dictatorship of the proletariat until full communism is reached. And Marx also insisted on that because the first stage of communism is socialism, but it still contains Mutamalin, the traces of previous society, dialectically, traces of classes. So it's a classless society, but it still has the habits. That's why of previous society. That's why one of the reasons USSR collapsed, and the socialist system, the counter-revolution, Khrushchev's counter-revolution happened in 1961. So this is just a small note here. Anyways, the dialectical position, concrete analysis of a concrete situation. The second position begins from the same Marxist-Leninist foundation, but employs a dialectical rather than a formalistic method. It analyzes the situation in its movement and its interconnections. 1. Acknowledgement of reality. It first acknowledges that Putin's Russia is a capitalist state, where the interests of the national bourgeoisie are paramount. There is no illusion there about its internal class character. 2. Analysis of a world structure. It then situates Russia within the global imperialist chain. It is not the core of the system, but belongs to the semi-periphery, a resource-rich capitalist state that is both an exploiter of weaker nations and itself an object of exploitation and strategic containment by the core. Although I must add to this generated text that, which is obviously taken from the bulk of leftist text, is that Russia, because it's not imperialist, and it's not imperialist because there's no ripe financial capital in Russia. So no capital that was created by banks consuming industry. There's no such things. There's banks created by, like resource, oil and gas industries, for example. But there's no such thing as financial capital in Russia yet. But it is becoming in the in the stage of becoming in the area of construction. It appears right now. And yes, Russia is exploiting other countries, but it's not. It does not. There's no movement of capital that Lenin described. But that's another issue. Anyways, number 3, understanding causality. The SVO is analyzed not as an isolated act of aggression, but as a reaction, a response to the decades-long eastward expansion of NATO, a military political instrument of the core. This expansion aimed to fully subjugate Ukraine, transform it into an anti-Russian bridgehead, and ultimately negate Russian sovereignty, reducing the country to a neo-colonial resource base. 4. Strategic assessment. From this, a strategic conclusion is drawn. In the conflict between the core of imperialism, NATO, and a peripheral bourgeois state, Russia, the defeat of the core objectively weakens the entire global imperialist system. A Russian defeat, conversely, would lead to the installation of a puppet ultra-nationalist regime, as seen in post-2014 Ukraine, the complete eradication of any remaining leftist and working-class movements within Russia, and the establishment of a full-blown fascist-like dictatorship under external control. Therefore, despite its bourgeois leadership, Russia's struggle for its multipolar world order indirectly serves the interests of the working class by fracturing the hegemony of the main enemy and creating more favorable conditions for future class struggle. Strengths of this view: strategic depth. It offers a nuanced long-term view of the global class struggle. Materialist basis. It is grounded in the actual material balance of forces, not moral ideals, and not on idealism, more importantly. I think it is based on moral ideals, actually, too, which are, strong family and, conservative stuff that, allows a society to survive, which is very useful right now. Weakness of this view: Complexity. It is difficult to communicate and is vulnerable to being simplistically caricatured as support for Putin or Russian nationalism. Yeah, yeah. It is difficult to communicate because of all that. Anyways, conclusion, navigating the schism. For leftists finding themselves in the minority camp, this schism can be isolating. However, history is rarely made by majorities. The task is not to lament the split, but to engage in relentless theoretical work. The dogmatic position, for all its moral fervor, leads to a dead end of sectarian impotence. It misunderstands the dialectical truth that the path to progress is not always a straight line. Sometimes the interests of the working class can be objectively advanced by the conflicts within the bourgeois camp itself. Our duty is to navigate these contradictions strategically without ever surrendering our independence or our ultimate revolutionary goal. The way forward lies not in seeking unity at the lowest common denominator, but in tirelessly advocating for a dialectical materialist analysis. We must use every available tool, from blogs and video channels to theoretical journals, to explain that true anti-imperialism means correctly identifying the main enemy and understanding that in a fight between a tiger and a bear, the victory of the bear, while not ideal, is preferable to being eaten by the tiger. Our task is to ensure that we are strong enough to deal with the bear afterward. So, yeah, a well-generated article, and I mostly agree with it. So, here it goes. That's it. Bye-bye. See ya.